Hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to the channel. Well, you might notice my background is just a little bit different this week to what it normally looks like, and that's because I'm away on vacation with my family at the moment for Easter. So I'll be doing my review this week from my hotel room, which is a little bit different, but I'm trying to keep up with what's going on in Picard. I don't want to fall behind, so thought I'd crank one out from the hotel room. Actually, I bumped into, would you believe, one of my subscribers and fans in the airport. Bumped into him in the customs queue. So a big shout out to Russ there for catching up with him whilst waiting to show my passport. But today we're going to talk about Star Trek Picard episode 7 entitled Monsters. We get a bit of a look more into Picard's psyche, what happened to him as a child. We've got some stuff going on with Rios and Teresa in terms of, bringing her in a little bit more in terms of what's going on with the crew from the 25th century. And at the same time, trying to track down Girardi for going out and about and getting a bit, Borg happy. So let's get into this week's review of episode 7 of Star Trek Picard season 2. So for starters, I thought it was great to see James Callis in this episode. I think obviously he was great in Battlestar Galactica. Great to see him in this episode as a Starfleet psych evaluator. He was there in Picard's mind, the whole dream sequence thing where he was kind of being analysed by this therapist. So yeah, good. I think it was very well cast to put James Callis in this role. I think him and Patrick Stewart next to each other worked really nicely. Good back and forth and everything. And obviously, by the end of this episode, we kind of find out that our Starfleet psych evaluator was in fact Picard's father, which I think we sort of had an inkling that might have been the case. I think prior to this episode, I think we were kind of speculating, is James Callis playing Picard's father? Obviously, there's photos of him implying to be some sort of, Starfleet medical officer. But in this case, he turned out to, both answers were correct. He turned out to be both Picard's father and the psych evaluator. So I think it was nice to, get a little bit more insight into Picard's upbringing. We've sort of seen moments of this over the course of various different episodes throughout the years where we've seen his relationship with his brother and his nephew and some, a bit of discussion about his mother. I did like the little thing about where he was talking about his mother and his mother having, the Queen having fiery red hair, and his mother had red hair. And then that sort of like, oh, that's why he had a thing for Beverly Crusher, I thought. Maybe, his mum had red hair, Beverly Crusher had red hair. So yeah, so I thought that was kind of a nice inclusion there, talking about his mum as the fiery redhead who was the Queen in the little stories that he was telling with the psych evaluator. That was interesting. We got a bit of an insight into Seven and Raffi and their relationship that had kind of played out before we even got to this season, and a bit more insight into them. It was cool, I thought, when Talon first went into Picard's mind to kind of probe around and work out what's going on with him, and so that she could bring him out of the coma that he was in. I thought it was kind of interesting. When she was in there, we were hearing all kind of Borg sort of sounds and locutus, dialogue back from Next Generation or whatever. I thought, obviously, these little Borg phrases and stuff when he was locutus are always floating around in his mind. I thought that was kind of a nice sort of touch in terms of just, one moment in his life that he kind of keeps ruminating about. Obviously that was pretty traumatic for him, and we kind of think it's slipped by the wayside for him, but clearly not. I think there's a lot of baggage left behind from the Borg incident with Picard, and I think he probably tries to hide it very well, but as we found out in this little scene where we've got locutus lines going on in the background, it gives us a bit more insight into just how much that moment in his life affected him. I think all of the stuff that Talon was kind of probing into Picard's mind or whatever, in terms of the monsters and everything, obviously, whether it was family violence issues or some abuse issues involving his father, which, obviously was the James Callis character. And that was obviously a large part of the episode we were kind of leading in towards to work out just how much of an influence his father had had on his life. And I think this is a slightly unresolved thing. I think there's still yet a little bit more to come with this issue, because we saw at the end there when he had the key, and we obviously, had him, Jean-Luc, talking to the psych evaluator from Starfleet, not as that role, but as his father, and talking about just in terms of what sort of destructive kind of influence, and there was obviously some probably mental health issues there with his mum, and his dad was sort of potentially trying to protect him, but then that ended up being kind of destructive at the same time. There's a lot of history there between his parents, obviously, that, you know, led to Jean-Luc, you know, running away from Earth and getting as far away from Earth as possible, and the Vineyard and Shadow Picard, and, you know, and having a career in space travel. I thought there were some really nice scenes in this episode between Rios and Teresa. I think we kind of knew that Teresa was kind of, you know, she's no dummy, and she was working out something's weird's going on here with Rios and Picard and everything, and obviously beaming various different medical implements into his hands from the La Sirena in order to stabilize Picard and everything while he's going through all his weird coma dream sequence moments or whatever. I think was really nice. And I think my favourite line from this episode, again, this season, time and time again, is giving us these little hark-back moments to Star Trek 4, Voyage Home. And again, we got another one in this episode, which was beautiful, which again was when Teresa finally found out about Rios and the fact that, you know, he's got all this future tech, and they, you know, beamed on board the La Sirena and everything, and Rios said, you know, when asked who he was by Teresa, who are you? You know, I'm human. I'm from Chile, but I just work in outer space, which is almost word for word exactly what Kirk said to Dr. Gillian when in Star Trek 4. She, you know, was probing him about who he was and what his career was and all that sort of stuff. And I think he gave the line, you know, I'm from Iowa, but I just work in outer space. There's always been these lovely little homage moments in this season to Star Trek 4. Obviously, the executive producers really love Star Trek 4 Voyage Home because there are so many Star Trek 4 references in this season, it's not funny. And I think this was my favourite line from the episode. It was good when Rios finally kind of beamed Dr. Teresa and her son on board the La Sirena, but I honestly think it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to be there when, I don't know, Seven and Raffi get back and find out what he's been up to, because I think there's going to be some words in terms of how much information he's told Dr. Teresa and her son, for that matter. But whether or not we end up with a mirror ending to this season, like we did in Star Trek 4, which was obviously in Star Trek 4, Dr. Gillian ended up coming back with Kirk and crew to the 23rd century. So whether Dr. Teresa and son end up coming back to the 25th century with the La Sirena crew is yet to be seen. But based on how many homages they've already had for Star Trek 4 this season, I would say that's a pretty safe bet. I'm kind of surprised in this episode we didn't get more stuff with Jurati. I thought from the looks of the trailer, where we saw Jurati hanging out in seedy bars and stuff and guys giving her sleazy looks, I thought I was sure to get some of these moments that I talked about in last week's sneak peek scene preview, where I thought we were almost sure to get some scene of, you know, Jurati punching the crap out of some sleazy bar guy or whatever, using Borg powers, you know, when she gets hit on or whatever. But that didn't happen. We just saw her kind of smashing a window with her fists to generate a bit of adrenaline to try to up her Borg nanoprobe count. So yeah, I thought this was probably a lost opportunity. I thought I was waiting for this scene where we saw in the trailer where this kind of sleazy guy kind of gives Jurati a look. I thought, oh, this guy is gone. He's gonna get taken out by Jurati for sure. But yeah, that's all we got. Basically, what we saw in the trailer was essentially all they showed in the episode. So I was kind of a little bit disappointed. There could have been some really great opportunities for humour in this episode, where we saw Jurati just going to town on sleazy bar guys or whatever that were trying to crack onto her in the red dress with the, you know, the low cut top and everything. I thought this is certainly going to happen, and it kind of never did. So I thought that was a little bit of a misdirect in terms of what we saw in the trailer, in terms of where they could have gone. And as we get Picard coming out of his coma at the end, we also get the reveal from Talon that she is in fact a Romulan, despite going the entire season saying, don't call me Laris, I'm not a Romulan, I'm not your Laris, all this sort of stuff. It's like, well, clearly she was. She revealed her true ears to him, and obviously there was, a line from Picard there sort of saying, oh, well, you must be a long-lost relative of Laris's or whatever. It's like, yeah, no surprises there, because there was just, at this point in the season, there was no logical explanation as to why Talon looked exactly like Laris, unless she was somehow related to Laris. But still good to see that mystery is now solved. Towards the end of the episode, we got the scene with Guinan, Picard going back to the bar to talk about Guinan, about summoning Q. Obviously, there's something very weird going on with Q, because we know he has very limited powers, if not no powers at all, in terms of him having to kind of persuade Renee and so forth verbally, rather than just doing the whole finger snap and changing things how he wanted them to play out. He kind of needed to kind of coerce her. So it seems like they've corrected the whole Renee Picard part of the timeline, but there's still some unresolved issues with Q as to why he has no powers. What's going on with him? And obviously we're coming to kind of realise that there's a little bit of this that they're now finding out about. And Picard talking to Guinan, and she seems a little bit closer to Whoopi Goldberg in this episode. I thought the first time we saw Guinan, the way the actress portrayed the character, I thought was miles apart from how Whoopi Goldberg portrayed the character. But I kind of felt maybe in this episode she brought her performance a little bit more in line with what we perhaps have expected in the past from Whoopi Goldberg in terms of Guinan. So that was certainly an improvement in this episode. And it was really good as well to learn a bit more about the history of the Elorians and the Q, in terms of there having been some sort of war in the past. There's been a truce. There have been terms placed on that truce, which was then sort of devised over drinks, and a certain history of those talks or negotiations were captured in this particular beverage that Guinan just happens to have in the bar. So I thought that was obviously kind of interesting, because we'd seen that scene, many times before with Guinan and Q back on Next Generation, where Guinan did the whole, got to look out for this Q, and you go, oh, what is this history that's going on between these two? And we never kind of really learnt much about that, but obviously now we're starting to learn a little bit about some sort of truce that was struck between the Elorians and the Q, and what the whole box and dice is in terms of their relationship. Only just beginning to catch a bit of that information, but at least we had, Guinan holding up her hands in the same pose that Whoopi Goldberg did, a little bit more info. So that's really interesting to learn in just terms of what the relationship was between the Elorians and the Q. So hopefully we get a bit more of that for next week's episode. Now, even though the summoning of Q did not work, and this obviously says a lot, because I guess they can't summon Q if Q has no powers. The summoning process only works to a Q which has powers. And that being said, it wasn't Q that appeared, but it was an FBI agent that then basically raided the bar and took Picard into custody, because he had surveillance footage of him sort of beaming into LA, them using sort of sci-fi tech and everything. And interestingly enough, this character, which wasn't named in this episode, the actor who plays this FBI agent, I think his name was Jay Carnes, actually has been in Star Trek before, and he was on an episode of Voyager where he played like a time cop, where they were kind of on the time ship Relativity. They were kind of patrolling incursions in the timeline, and they had to essentially police changes and whatnot that occurred, and they it was quite a good episode. I remember it quite well. But yeah, there was a character of Duquesne who was like the first officer on board this ship, and I think at the end of the episode where his boss turned out to be the baddie, he ended up taking command of the Relativity, and I assume taking command. And it's the same actor that plays the FBI agent. Now, based on the fact that our FBI agent is saying how much he likes sci-fi, he's got video footage of Picard beaming into LA, and he's claiming to be an FBI agent, I'm thinking, is he really an FBI agent, or is he really a time cop called Duquesne that's come back in time to give Picard a bit of a slap on the wrist for mucking about with the timeline? It seems odd to me that you would cast an actor that had a pretty prominent role in a Star Trek episode before if you were going to basically make him a completely different character. I think obviously this has been done before many times with actors that have worn prosthetics, who've played aliens in one episode, then played humans in another episode, or actors, you know, like Jeffrey Combs, who's played Ferengi and who's played Vorta, Andorians, you know, Shran. He's played many roles before, but they've always been, you know, changes to those characters in alien makeup so that it is a different person. Whereas our character in this episode, our FBI agent, appeared exactly how he did, albeit 20 years older than he was last time we saw him. If this actor didn't turn out to be Duquesne, the time cop from the USS Relativity in the future, it would be disappointing. Hopefully the writers have tied this together, and this is in fact the case, and we're not going to get just some, you know, weird situation like we did last season where they completely recast the role of Bruce Maddox in a completely different actor, and yeah, it's like, oh, what's going on here? But yeah, look, all in all, I thought this was a nice episode. It certainly left me wanting more in terms of knowing more about the Elorians and the Q and their history. The history, if there is, you know, what the history is between Guinan and Q, and whether we're going to get some more info from our FBI guy, who hopefully turns out to be Duquesne from the Relativity episode of Voyager. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like and a comment. Leave a super thanks if you're able to. It really helps the channel out, much appreciated. Check out my merch in the merch store, where there's always bargains going on for, you know, cool Star Trek hoodies and t-shirts and mugs and caps and all that sort of thing. And I'll see you guys very soon for my next video. I'll catch you soon.